So today, I hope to provide some information on an accidental injury to a child that occurred as a result of a police service dog bite, and to discuss the next steps that will be taken. On Saturday evening at approximately 5 p.m., we received a 911 call from the 100 block of Avenue L South, alleging a home invasion involving weapons that had just occurred. As part of our response, a canine officer attended, and the officer began to track suspects from the area. He tracked through the alley and through the yard at the 100 block of M, where he was funneled between a house and a fence. The police dog, who was on a lead, rounded the corner of the house ahead of the officer, where he encountered a young child in the yard, obviously unrelated to the event, and she was bitten by the dog. The child was transported to hospital with her mother for treatment, and it's my understanding of the injuries is that they were consistent with a dog bite to the side of the body between the armpit and the hip. And I want to acknowledge the fear and the injury caused by this dog bite. I'm not aware of a previous incident like this in Saskatoon, and we consider it a very serious event. The dog involved is a 3-year-old Belgian Malinois that has been active for the past 10 months, and he has been removed from service. A bite like this is obviously not what the dogs are trained for, and so the incident will be reviewed to determine exactly what occurred. We've asked our training unit to assess the dog, including his history and training, so that they can provide recommendations on next steps. We expect a use of force report as well, and an evaluation of the dog is mentioned in the coming weeks, and longer term decisions will be made at that time. Our canine officers and their animals are an important part of our organization. The dogs are selected for police work, and they all receive extensive training to a provincial standard, and that is reviewed annually by supervisors in the unit. Fortunately, this is a rare occurrence, but having said that, I don't want to downplay the seriousness of what would have been a terrifying event for a little girl and her family. I've attempted to speak to the family personally, and when they are available, we'll be offering victim services, and we will continue to keep them informed of our progress on this investigation. Thank you. So I'll take questions at this point.
I know you said that there's going to be a review of the dog's history, but just in the days, hours after this, has there been any indication that this dog has disobeyed orders before?
Not to our knowledge, no. No.
What would account for the dog's behavior?
That's a really good question. I think to answer that, you'd have to be somebody who had some expertise in handling dogs and training dogs. So that's the kind of evaluation that we'll be doing. Not just what training the dog has received, but the specific incident and what occurred on that night or that afternoon, so that we can begin to understand exactly why it did occur.
There was a witness report that said that the officer that was operating with the dog told the dog to let go several times, and he didn't. Can you confirm that?
No, I can't confirm that. What I can say is that part of our internal investigation, part of our use of force investigation will include those sorts of details.
How do you explain the news release that came out with a child who had the wrong age? It said she was 8, she's 6, saying the dog released the female instantly at the handler's command. That's not the story that witnesses are telling us.
Yeah, I think that I just answered that by saying that when we do our internal investigation, we'll look for those sorts of details. That'll be part of the use of force review.
Those involved say it looks like the police are downplaying it by getting the incorrect age, releasing dog instantly.
Yeah, that's obviously not the case. I don't want to downplay this. This is a serious event, a terrifying event for a little girl, and a horrible thing to go through as a family. I can only imagine what that would feel like, and we certainly don't want to downplay it.
Removed from service permanently, temporarily, while investigation takes place?
Well, for now, we're going to do it in stages. I mean, the first stage was to remove the dog from active service. It was scheduled to work for the last couple of days. We removed it from service. We'll be assigning it to the training officer, and they'll start that review, and we'll have to sort of see what those first initial results are from the standpoint of an officer training, and what further investigative steps have to be taken. Use of force, of course, as well has to occur. So I can't give you a timeline yet, but I think within the coming weeks you'll have a better understanding of how long this should take.
Has there been any disciplinary action for the officers involved?
No, the officers will remain on duty.
What are the long-term options for this dog? Like, depending on the investigation, but overall, what are the options?
Well, I think we're pretty early to start talking about options for the dog. I think what we'd like to do first is, take step by step. And the first thing was to remove him from immediate duty, and then to start to evaluate his training and his behavior, and take it all into account in context with the use of force review and all the rest of the investigative steps. And then we'll have an idea of what the recommendations are and what our options are at that point. So right now, I think we're a little early to start looking at options.
Will this dog ever be back out on patrol again?
Yeah, I think that's sort of what I was alluding to, is that we're, I think, too early into the investigation to determine that at this point. We want to find out, first of all, exactly what occurred, do a review of the situation, do a review of the dog's training, the handler's actions, and then we'll have a better picture of whether that could ever occur or not.
Well, then you're saying that it is a possibility.
I think that we're too early, I think, in this at this stage of the investigation to make any kind of comment on the future of the dog.
How long would an investigation like this take?
Pardon me?
How long would an investigation like this take?
Well, I think we'll know how long the investigation will be within a week or so. I think within a couple of weeks we'll sort of get a better understanding of what is going to be required to get a full picture of this dog and the response we've had in the community, his actions and his training, and there's a lot for us to consider. I'm thinking that we'll have an idea of that within a few weeks here.
So you have officers out on the street during the day. Why aren't the dogs muzzled until released to go after somebody?
I'll let you speak with Mitch Yuzdepski, or Superintendent Yuzdepski, about the actual operations of the animal. He'd have a better understanding of that.
Do you have any idea how far behind the dog the officer was? You said it was on a harness,
Yeah.
and it was around the corner out of sight.
Yes.
How far behind?
So our indications are that it was on a lead, and there's different kinds of leads. So again, I'll refer that to Superintendent Yuzdepski. If you want to answer that now, Mitch. Or...
Sure. Normally, a dog tracking, and that's the case with this dog here, is in a harness and a 20-foot lead. And my understanding is the dog was on a shortened lead at that time, or at least about half length, which would be about 10 feet away. And
is it typical for the dog to be out of its handler's sight?
At times, and at that short distance, if you're navigating a tight space or a tight corner, that's a possibility, and does happen. There needs to be a bit of a gap between the dog and the handler as they come around a corner, for instance. In this case, it was a home invasion investigation, so a serious criminal matter, and the dog and handler need to have some separation. He was on a lead, but was slightly ahead of the handler. And anytime the dog is tracking, they're in front of the handler, usually at a distance of about 20 feet. But in places where you're going to go around a corner, that distance is shortened.
We have two witnesses who told us that lead was slack, like they could see the slack of the leash on the ground. It wasn't like someone was trying to pull that dog back. How common is that when a dog is trying to scoop out a bad guy?
Well, a lot of tracking, it would be uncommon to be tracking and to be slack in the leash. There's usually tension in there, but if you can imagine, if you come upon a corner and the dog turns a corner, there's going to be some slack in the leash as you navigate that corner. Again, until a review is completed, it's difficult for us to provide any kind of concrete answers on some of that.
Where are SPS dogs trained?
They're trained locally to a provincial standard that's mandated by the Saskatoon Police Commission, and that standard was established and approved by the Commission in 2005.
Where are they trained?
They're trained locally in Saskatoon and the surrounding rural area.
Can you be more specific?
Like
Is there a
by
name for business?
internally, or a local dog training company?
Yes, the provincial standard is that the trainer for the dogs has to have spent a number of years in the service I believe it's 8 years service and trained more than one dog. So they have a number of years of experience. They've been around a number of our dogs. We have 9 dog teams in service in the city, and the sergeant that's in charge of the unit has been in the unit for some time and handled a number of dogs and trained a number of dogs.
Is that 9 dog teams right now, or 10 minus the one that's on?
9 dog teams right now.
Okay. Otherwise it would be 10.
No, it would, I guess 8 dog teams right now, otherwise would be 9.
How long was the dog trained before it went on?
The train on a new for a new dog and a new handler is a 16-week program, and they train and certify on different levels, and you know, they include obedience, they include retrieval, agility, searching, and criminal apprehension. So they train and certify on a number of different profiles. And tracking, I don't think I said tracking.
In a case like this, I guess we're wondering how hard is it to train a dog not to go after the wrong target, not to get distracted?
Well, I mean, that we you know, train the dogs to you know, go. The only time a dog will typically bite someone is you know, if the dog itself is threatened, the handler is threatened, or on command of the handler. So, you know, to your question, how difficult is it to train the dog not to bite someone? I mean, this was an accident, a terrible accident, and you know, this isn't something that happens commonly. Our canine teams respond to about 5,000 calls a year. They deploy their dogs about 1,000 times a year, and very few of those incidents, or a very small percentage of their deployments, actually end up in a bite. And you know, as the chief had indicated earlier, you know, we haven't seen a bite like this in the city, you know, involving a child.
So why aren't the dogs muzzled before going after somebody?
Well, we don't muzzle the dogs if, you know, in the tracking profile, for one, they're scenting, and they're identifying the suspect's scent, and you know, to do that they have to use you know, their mouth, their nose, and a muzzle would inhibit their ability to properly scent, to properly look for who they're looking for.
Is this a matter that could be brought in front of the Saskatchewan Police Commission?
If you, I don't know what you're referring to in that question. This incident is a use of force. It will be reviewed by the use of force committee. All use of force are reported to the Saskatchewan Police Commission.
Just to get the timeline down, when the officer came around, the handler came around the corner, had the dog already bit the child, or did he come around and then, as he was coming around, the dog bit the child?
My understanding is that when the dog turned the corner first, the officer could hear the child cry, so that he didn't see the actual contact.
Mitch, just while you're there at the
Sure.
microphone, how comfortable are you with this dog going back out again at any point in its future?
Well, I don't know the dog itself. You know, this dog did complete the 16-week program with no issues identified. The dog's been in service for 10 months after completing training, and there's been no issues identified. You know, this is the first incident where any kind of issue was identified, any accidental bite, and you know, until I know the full details, until we've reevaluated the training and looked at this incident a little closer, I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment at this point. It's a little bit too early for that.
Talk with a local trainer who feels that this, based on police accounts, witness accounts, that he questions whether it's a training issue. How would you respond to that? Are the dogs adequately trained to avoid situations like this?
Yes, I would say that they certainly are. They meet they meet the provincial standards that's been set and recognized, and our teams compete often in the Canadian Police Canine Association championship and trials, and often place very well in those trials. So, I mean, if we were to look at a benchmark of where our dogs are across the country, that we continue to rank up very high.
Are the conclusions and recommendations from the review going to be made public?
Well, there'll be an internal review and a report that will go to the police commission at some point, and when we report use of force to them. It's, I guess, difficult to tell right now. An internal review isn't often made public. We'll take a look at what those recommendations will be, and we'll have to make a determination from there.
Now, the family member who I spoke to says she doesn't blame the dog. In fact, she thinks that the handler could have handled the situation better. Can you speak more on that, and what training does that officer go into, and how could they have trained so that would be avoided?
Yeah, you know, that's a difficult question to answer as well. You know, it's, you know, from experience from years ago. I was a handler for 8 years. A number of years ago, in a, you know, a similar training environment or a similar actual deployment, it wouldn't be uncommon for me to shorten the lead up as well, and to come around a corner, and you know, I don't know, other than, you know, I spoke with the member. He feels horrible about this accident as well, and I think the member is probably going over in his mind, you know, what could I have done different, and so, you know, I think that's something that he's asking himself, and you know, something that you know, we have to take a look at when we review this incident in earnest.
She said that no apology was given. Is that common?
Well, I don't know if there was an opportunity for the member to do so at the time. You know, I'm a parent. Many in the room here are parents too, and the first thing that we want to do is make sure our child is okay. There's a lot of emotion at the time. I know the handler was there and then felt it best that he remove himself from that situation as soon as he could, and let the family deal with the emotion. There were other members present that were there, and I know the chief has tried to reach out to the family. Other members have tried to reach out to the family as well. So, you know, we're deeply sorry for this incident, and I'm sure if the member had an opportunity, he would express those same sentiments.
A lot of the public feedback that we're seeing is along the lines of, if this was a member of the public's dog and they bit a child, they put the dog down. How does, you know, how does that apply to a member of the police service? Like, is that in the realm, or are there different you know, different rules?
Right. I don't know if there's necessarily different rules. You know, often in those cases we see a dog at large, you know, a dog not on line, a not working dog, a dog that got out from a yard, and you know, those situations are fairly distinctly different. You know, in this case, this was a working dog that was doing initially tracking down some people from a home invasion. So he was tracking, and when he came around the corner, something caused the dog to behave in the manner it did, and that's what we'll try and get to the bottom of and try and find an answer for.
So why is this different from a civilian dog? that they often run around at large? This one was working?
Well, I think, as I've trying to explain it too, is that yes, this dog was performing a task of tracking, trying to scent for people that ran from a scene of a crime, and it wasn't at large. It was in a harness with a line that was at a shortened distance, and that most cases I've seen where a dog that bit someone in the public. Remember, the Publix is typically a dog that's running at large somewhere. That's the only difference that, when you ask me what the difference is, that's the only difference that I can determine.
Well, and this might be also better for Chief Cooper too, but I mean, if I'm a civilian and his dog runs up and bites me, I can sue him. I can't sue the police. What recourse does this family have?
Well, certainly, I don't want to speak to the civil process of options for the family. They can, they'll get that advice on their own, I suspect. But I think that if the police service has a tool like a dog, we're responsible for the use of that tool, and certainly would be accountable for the use of that tool. It's not a pet. This is a working dog. It's trained to track. It's trained to protect the handler. It's trained to do the things it was doing. It acted outside of that training, and that's what we're investigating.
There are also a lot of parents out there who are saying we're turning down the news and we're trying not to let our kids know about this because it is quite, as you mentioned, terrifying.
It is.
Any other words for this family who may be watching this?
Well, we've been, we'll continue to try and reach out to the family. Of course, we want to make sure that that they're provided victim services and that they get what they need to try and get through a couple of really hard days here as they struggle with how to deal with their own children and their own experiences. And it's something we feel horrible about. I can only imagine, as I mentioned, how terrifying that would be to see your child or to know that happened to your child. And as a service, we've taken this seriously and we're looking into it, and we'll have to move ahead from there.
There was a similar incident, one or two in Regina last summer with civilians and police dogs. Do you look into how other agencies have handled similar incidents? As you guys decide how to handle.
Well, we have a provincial police commission, and that's who sets the standards for police dogs. So anything that happens in Saskatchewan around dogs or related to dogs is important to us to be aware of, for sure.
Is the process any different if there's a dog bite within Saskatoon? There was one, I think, in 2013 that then turned into a civil case. Is there like a review that's done internally within Saskatoon Police after an event like that?
Yeah, this will be an internal review. There's a use of force. It's considered a use of force because it's a tool for our service, and so we do an internal review. When I refer to a use of force review, that's exactly what it is. It's an investigation into use of force, and so that'll be conducted.
And there's possible recommendations coming out of that?
Correct. Yeah. Correct.
Again, just to clarify, you said that the handler will be back on duty or on duty at some point.
Right.
On your guys' official Facebook page on the Sunday night, there was reference to the dog and the handler being off duty for this week. Is that, because you had said earlier that he's back on, or the handler is back on?
He will be back on. He's on
Okay.
the officer's us on regular scheduled days off, so he'll be back to work whenever those days are concluded. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.